Hello everyone, happy 2023. I hope that this year is full of blessings for all of us. I know that I had such a pivotal year last year and it'll be hard to beat, but I know that 2023 will top all of my expectations and I wish the same for you. So we are going to be jumping into the best books that I read in 2022, which let me just say I read some amazing books last year. It was actually my most successful year of reading, which I'm so happy and proud to share that I was able to read one book a week. So I read 52 books last year, which is just wilder than any of my imaginations, especially because just a few years ago, I was really only reading a few books, if that. And when I set my mind to it, I did it. First, I had the goal of 10 books for the year, then 30, and then this year I had a goal of 50, which I ended up beating. So if you want to follow along my reading journey, then definitely follow me on Goodreads, add me as a friend. I think it's such a great platform that really helps you to figure out what books you want to read and to also just track your reading, reflect on the books you've read, and it makes it just so exciting and fun to choose new books. I literally spend so much time on that app, so I definitely recommend for you guys to get a Goodreads account if you don't already have one, and make sure to follow me once you get one. So I have 9 favorite books from last year to share with you guys, as well as a few honorable mentions, so let's just get right into it. The first honorable mention is called Migrations, and it is by Charlotte McConaughey, and it's called Migrations because the main character in the book is following these birds on their final migration. And with each chapter, you're discovering a little bit more about the main character as well as life as we know it, because it is obviously set in the future. Global warming has gotten a lot worse, and that is obviously reflected in the environment and the surroundings of this character. And there's a mystery in there because you don't really know her past. She mentions her husband and she talks about her family, but then she's on this exploration alone. So a lot of people find her to be kind of mysterious and questionable and not someone that they can really trust. And so this book is just awesome because you're following her on her adventure. You're getting flashbacks, I think, in every other chapter that goes back in time and describes her history and how she got to where she is today. And it's just one of those books that keeps you engaged. It keeps you wanting to, read another chapter and figure out what happens next. So that is an honorable mention. The next honorable mention is called Crime and Punishment, and that is by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I hope I did not butcher that. But this is a classic piece of literature. I believe it's a Russian text. And this was definitely one of those books that was challenging for me to read, to stay interested in. And that's why it's an honorable mention, because obviously if it's a 5-star read, then there are no complaints. But with this book, it is just such a whirlwind because the main character is someone who is not mentally sane. And so you are getting the perspective of his consciousness, and he is super flawed. He has all this inner turmoil. He's someone who seems, to be a normal average guy, but he is struggling internally and battling these demons which end up taking over him. I don't want to reveal too much, but basically the main character ends up getting involved in a huge crime, and then the entire rest of the story is kind of him coming to terms with it, trying to get himself out of being guilty. It's just this really back and forth dilemma in which you're like, is this character sane? Does he have a mental illness? Is he going mad? And so it's really interesting because you're actually in the mind of someone who isn't sound. I really loved the ending, and I thought it highlighted how healing and how therapeutic love can be. I truly believe that love can save people, and it definitely did save this main character in the end. So that is another book that I recommend. It's not an easy read, but if you want to tackle it, it is pretty insane and unlike anything that I have ever read before. Okay, the next honorable mention is Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. So you probably are familiar with this book as a show because I think it was available on Hulu. It is about this society known as Gilead, and it is set in the future where it's really hard for women to conceive. And so how they have managed this is they've come up with this premise of a handmaid. And a handmaid is basically someone whose role is to reproduce on behalf of a family, but the child doesn't even belong to her. The child belongs to the family. So in a way, she is like a housekeeper, but kind of like a slave, and it is just so unethical what these women go through. Now, this book is an honorable mention because it was very difficult to get through. Like, Margaret Atwood's style of writing in this book was really difficult to understand because it's kind of all over the place. The language is very sterile, which kind of reflects the environment. It's very cold, it lacks depth. There's a void in a sense in the writing, but it does a great job because the women in this Gilead society really lack the feelings that we have today, right? Of love, of purpose, of freedom. And that is why this book is so powerful, because it shows you how when we lose our freedom, when we lack freedom, all color is taken out of our life. All meaning is taken out of our days. And so you can really feel that in her style of writing. And it's not easy to get through. It's definitely not an easy read, but it is so powerful and a book that I have not stopped thinking about. So the last honorable mention is called The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. And this is definitely a book that's outside of my comfort zone because it has a little bit of these mystical kind of fairy tale elements that I'm not usually drawn to in a text, but it worked. So you're following this young lady who she loves to read, she loves to write. She's actually an author, and she works at a library that's run by her father. And so as you guys can see, like, this is definitely a book that's written for literature lovers. And so this lady ends up receiving, I think, a letter from a very, very famous, renowned author. And she is asking the main character to interview her. And she's basically going to tell her all about her life, all of these secrets about who she is, because there is a lot of mystery surrounding this author. She doesn't use her real name in her publications, and she's never really given any journalist any sort of truth in terms of like her background, her childhood, her parents. And so there's just a lot of questions surrounding this author. And so our main character is then sent off to go interview her, and you find out the things that they have in common. And then there's just all these twists and turns, and like by the end of the story, your mind will be spinning. So I definitely will give it that much. It's not in my favorite books just because once again, it kind of had some of those magical elements that I'm not typically drawn to. But besides that, it was pretty dang good. So I recommend those 4. So now let's get into my favorite books of 2022. And we are going to start with the one that shattered me to pieces. And this is called When Breath Becomes Air by Kalanithi. So I'm sure you've heard about this book. It is a memoir. It's a true story, and it is about this doctor who is just barely now completing his residency when he finds out that he has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, I believe. You are just basically living this guy's last moments alongside him as he talks about purpose, as he talks about what it means to live your life knowing that any day might be the last. He talks about the struggles of residency and of being, in the medical field and the battles that these people face on a daily basis. And not only is he dealing with all of these struggles that, all surgeons and doctors face, but he's doing it while also being a patient himself, someone who has cancer. And so it is just a story of resilience, of strength, of what it means to continue living and working even if you might have a life-threatening disease. And so I just had so much respect for this author. This was one of those books that will make you feel like you will be so emotionally attached to this character, to his story, to his passions, how he approaches life. Like the fact that he was willing to write a book during such a difficult stage of his life because he was like, you know what? No, like I was always meant to do this in my life, and to see how he was able to blend his passions into a career. Like it was just so inspiring, so amazing, written to perfection. Like he is just an outstanding writer. I recommend When Breath Becomes Air to everyone. If you want to get your heart ripped out, then definitely check that one out. Okay, the next book is called The Evolution of Desire, and it is by Buss, I believe. So this book is a nonfiction book, and it is the largest research study that has been conducted on partners. And so it will literally enlighten you as to how much data they have about why women prefer certain type of men, why men prefer certain type of women, how jealousy came about. This book talks about mating. It talks about, how different things such as birth control and different movements such as like the feminist movement have impacted the way that we mate today. I think that this should be required reading for anyone who is interested in relationships and love and mating and anything like that. And obviously, as someone who is a dating coach, I'm always looking for actual facts and statistics about why we make the mating choices that we do. And this was just a one-stop shop. I was highlighting all over the place, and it just reveals some things that we like to deny, and we like to say, oh no, like that's not true. Men don't gravitate towards younger women, but the stats show that men do. Men throughout all of history have preferred women who were several years younger than them. Once again, we kind of have this dilemma where we say, why is it that women prefer men with resources? And once again, the stats show that women have always preferred men with high status roles in society. This was even before cities were formed. Like women gravitated towards men who had resources, whether that was more farmland, more tools, more assets to his name. Women have always preferred to be with a man who was stable, who could provide, who could protect. And so there are so many different studies that show that these things are actually true and they're based in fact. And it's really interesting, even like seeing the statistics of those who were raised with broken families. It's really sad to see that a lot of these kids end up having a lot more prevalency of certain issues such as depression, such as abuse of some sort when they were lacking a parent during those vital young years of life. So I can get so deep into this book, but I thought it was amazing. It had a lot of great statistics and percentages and things like that from all over the world. So if you are interested in learning about mating and how it's been done for hundreds and thousands of years all across the globe, then I highly recommend this one. Okay, my next favorite book is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. And oh my God, this book just pulled at every single heartstring. The author has the most amazing way of describing a culture, of describing certain traditions, of describing the experience that many foreigners have when they immigrate to America and all of those struggles that come with pursuing the American dream. He also has a amazing way of just describing characters. Like, the main character is not someone who you're always going to agree with. Actually, there are going to be times when you are so against the main character and how he interacts with different people in his life and how those friendships end up impacting him years and decades down the line. It talks about regret, it talks about forgiveness, it talks about situations in which we made mistakes as children that will haunt us for the rest of our lives, and why it is so important to show people love when they're around us and when we feel it, and to not shy away from expressing our emotion and love and admiration for someone. So I could go on about this, but I highly recommend The Kite Runner. It is full of just quotes that will give you all the feels, and I absolutely loved it. It was great writing, great character formations, and it was just one of those books that it was a coming of age story, but it was mixed with like just so many gems and so many pieces of wisdom that I absolutely love. Okay, my next favorite book is called Wild, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail by Cheryl Strayed. So this is also another like autobiography. That seems to be one of my favorite genres lately. So this story was actually made into a movie. You guys might have watched it. It's about this lady who has this midlife crisis and just decides that she is going to go on this insane hiking excursion where she is just like backpacking for months on end. This chick never hiked before, never really did any overnight excursions before, and she just put on a pair of boots and was like, I'm doing this. I want to live in the wild. I want to experience what it means to just fight for something and to be fully alone, right? She was someone who always kind of gripped on to people to show her love and happiness, but after losing her mother and after having this horrible experience in which she fell down into kind of a rabbit hole and started doing hard drugs, and so she just had all these different things that led her to finally put her foot down and saying, no, I'm gonna go out there and I'm going to experience the wild. And I just thought this book was so empowering. Like, it was so empowering. Like, it made me feel like, dang, like if this lady could do it, I could do it. And it gave me a lot of respect for people who go hitchhiking, for people who go on week-long hikes or backpacking excursions. And it made me just realize how awesome it is. Like, if you're able to literally survive in the wild, then you end up having such a different type of trust and respect in yourself, right? Because you know you can do it. You know you can accomplish something that seems so utterly impossible. It gives you the motivation that you need to pursue your dreams. So I thought that this was an awesome feel-good book. Okay, my next favorite book is Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. And this book is a romance, which is actually one of the genres that I generally stray away from. I'm not big on romance. I usually think it's so cheesy. And even when I first started reading this book, I wasn't like sold on it. But you guys, by the end of it, I could not stop thinking about this book, and that's always when I know that a book was good, when I cannot stop thinking about it. The way that this author is able to describe this all-consuming, toxic, like first love is so on point. And I think if you have been in a situation where you were like head over heels for someone and just so like enraptured by them and getting to know them, and you know how it is, like when you haven't really been in a relationship and this is like your first love, let's say, he is able to express those emotions so eloquently and in a way that is so like brutally honest. Like there are some very graphic moments of passion, of love, of like sexual, nature that exists between these two people. And I just thought that it was written beautifully. You could really feel that this dynamic between these two people was real. Like it didn't feel like a story. And it's also talks a lot about when someone's in the closet and they don't really feel comfortable coming out, and that weird phase that a lot of people feel where they can't really identify orientation in terms of who they're attracted to. And also, it doesn't have a happy ending. And I've always realized that those true realistic books that don't always just have happy endings, they tend to stick with us a lot longer because generally, life doesn't always have a happy ending. Or I shouldn't say life. Life generally does have a happy ending, but like these sorts of situations where we're so head over heels for someone and so like toxically into them, they generally don't end well. So I like that the author made it realistic. He didn't just say, oh no, and then they lived happily ever after. It didn't end up in the way that most romance books do. The next story, completely different, is called East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And you guys, this is a classic for a reason. It's one of the longest books I've ever read, and oh my god, can this man just develop characters and paint them in such a realistic picture. He is just a master at coming up with these different family dynamics. This book basically walks you through multi-generations of two different families and just different decisions they make. Some of the decisions bring them success, some of them bring them poverty, some of them bring them heartbreak, some of them bring them just torment. It talks about evil and how bad people in our life will not just ruin our life, but even the next generation, and how just everything is interconnected. And he is so gifted in developing a setting for a story and an environment and having that really reflect the people who live there. It is just one of those stories where, like, if you ask me what it's about, I really can't pinpoint it because it's not like there's one true climax and one true conflict. It's basically just all these different family dynamics and parent dynamics and child dynamics and how all of these things mesh and work together. And it is so wholesome and so entertaining and so interesting. Like, you get so attached to certain characters and you root for them, and some other ones you're like, no, like, why did they do that? And it's just one of those books where you will be so immersed in their lives that you literally feel like they're your neighbors. Okay, the next book that absolutely wowed me is called The Vital Question: Why is Life the Way It Is? And that is written by Nick Lane. If you are into biochemistry and how life came to be and how the first cells came about and multiplied and created an organism, and like you want to go much deeper than just, oh, Big Bang Theory, or you know, whatever theory that you've read in a science textbook or maybe even watched in a YouTube video, this book will just startle you, shock you, impress you. Like, it is so detailed and so to the T with the charts, the diagrams, and like, it is a very difficult read. Even someone that was a biology background had trouble getting through this, so just know that you're not alone, but it will blow your mind and it will let you know like what the actual factors and kind of constraints are in order for life to truly sprout. Like, what conditions must be met in order for all of these things to work, right? And for us to be able to undergo mitosis and meiosis and all these other processes. How did those truly come to be? If you want to just go down that rabbit hole and learn about science and how life can come to be and what conditions must be met in order for life to grow and flourish and thrive, then this book is for you. Okay, the next book, which I definitely recommend this one for everyone, like even if you're typically not a reader, it's called Summer Frost by Blake Crouch. It's just a short story. I actually read it on my Kindle. It's available through Amazon Prime. So if you do have an Amazon Prime account, you can read this for free. It's less than 100 pages, you guys, and it is so good. It is one of those books where you'll probably read it all in one sitting, and it's action-packed. So I really like it because in the book, it's mainly just one dialogue that's going back and forth between this guy and this sort of like AI type of person who you can think of to be like Siri, right? And it's set in the future, and it's talking about a society in which we use virtual reality, we use headsets, we basically play games, but in a fully immersive way, where like we have an avatar and we go in and we're in this whole different kind of multiverse, you could say. This author was basically able to build an entire plot, build realistic characters in this futuristic sci-fi type of world in less than 100 pages and blow your mind. So if that's not impressive, I don't know what is, but I think that everyone should read this short story because I absolutely loved it. The ending was just insane. The ending was so good. So definitely check it out. Okay, my last 5-star read of 2022 was The Glass Castle by Jeannette Walls. I have an entire video where I dissect this book and talk about why I love it so much and why it is one of my favorites, so I will link that up above. But just to recap, it's also a memoir, and it is about this super dysfunctional family, basically recalling this girl's childhood experiences and how they were so traumatic for her, and how she was able to break out of homelessness, poverty, and all of these really hard, negative, dark experiences, how she was able to rebuild from that and create an amazing life for herself and kind of just flip the script and forgive her parents and heal through all of the pain that she had endured. So that is the last book that I recommend for you guys. 2022 was such an amazing reading year for me. Please comment down below your favorite book that you read in 2022, or maybe just like your favorite book in general. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye!